Hello, hello. Welcome to week 3 of the Current Review podcast. Today, David and I have an interesting itinerary set up. We're going to discuss everything EVs, ranging from EV sales, thanks to the new Kelley Blue Book data, which just came out. And this is really, really, really interesting, especially with the Cybertruck. That's a huge anomaly, and I'm sure we have lots of thoughts to discuss that. We also want to just talk about charging infrastructure in general, planning for EV road trips, and a bunch of information along those lines. And then finally, we'll probably just go into the EV deal of the week. And this one is an interesting one, especially for the performance enthusiasts. So, David, how have you been recently?
I've been great. I actually just came back from San Francisco and saw a lot of Cybertrucks there. And I have to say, they stick out like a freaking sore thumb. I mean, it's cool, but I don't know how they're going to age. But we'll see. It seems to be like a lot of people are down with it for now, you know? Yeah.
Yeah,
So excited.
it's crazy how many are out in the Bay. It's just, they just take over. It's crazy. Because I remember
Yeah.
earlier this summer, and I think by then they were probably only on the roads for 8 months around then. Honestly, not too sure. But every day I would see at least one. And that's just crazy, just being in such an area. Granted, I live very close to Tesla Fremont's factory. So I guess maybe I'll give I'll give just the benefit of the doubt to just the prevalence of them for that reason. But still, there's a lot of them on the road, and people seem to really like them.
I'll say, like, I've driven one, and I have to say it drives like a car, which is very helpful in the city compared to my Rivian. When I drive it in the city, it's got a long wheelbase, and even my wife has trouble making those turns. You got to go wide sometimes, you know. But the Cybertruck with the four wheels, you know, steering, they did a great job with it. But again, like, maybe it'll grow on me and it'll grow on other people. But man, it sticks out like a you know.
Yeah, well, it just makes such a big statement. 'Cause at least with the Rivian, it's probably still gets a fair amount of attention, I would assume, but it still has a very conventional look. But just Cybertruck, it's like there's no way you can kind of normalize that. I mean, it's
No,
insane. Like even
it
just going
doesn't
through the
blend in at
drive-through,
all.
it's like,
Yeah. Oh my! I mean, it sticks out. It sticks above. I mean, there's no, like, even from behind. Like, I was following one. It's so pointy and boxy, and it's a little weird not seeing a rear window. You know,
Mhm.
like it's. I'll say it's radical, and I guess I can appreciate that it's trying to push the boundaries with car design, and we'll see how much translates into other vehicles. But for the time being, if we want to dive into the Kelley Blue Book numbers, I think overall it's promising. And to me, it's telling a very different story than what sometimes the media really hypes up, which is like, oh,
Mhm.
EV sales are down, EV sales are down. To me, I mean, it's not as high, I think, as people were hoping for when they were blowing up at one point, but they're still up. Like, we're
Mhm.
still
Yeah,
selling more EVs than we ever have, which is
yeah.
really,
So
really
that's the thing, because
amazing.
people are
Yeah.
complaining. I mean, still, if you look at the trend, EV sales are increasing year over year. And then the argument is, oh, well, the growth rate now is slowing. Okay, but it's still a growth rate. The cars are still growing in sales year over year. And I believe every single consecutive year since a decade or so ago, EVs have been increasing market share in terms of new vehicles. I'll have to check on that data because maybe during the pandemic, something, I don't know. But generally, I mean, EVs are going to be up to around 10% of new car sales.
Yeah, I mean, I look. I mean, there was a couple years in a row where I saw in the data it was growing 50% year over year, which is
Mhm.
amazing, right? But we're also starting on a low base, right? So I think there was like one year it was 2 million total EVs on the road here in the U.S., and then we sold 1 million. So, you know, it grew 50%, but that's a really, really low base, right? If you take a look, we've got way more. I think it still represents like 5% of overall car stock, or less than
Mhm.
5%, right?
Yeah.
But still, like, right here, it's showing 11% year over year from Q3 to Q3, which already, I don't think Q3 is necessarily like the blockbuster quarter. I think it tends to be Q4, right?
Yep.
The end of the year,
And
where people
here's the
start to really
interesting thing too.
push
Year
vehicles.
to date, yeah. So even year to date, up about 8.7% year over year, quarter three. Yeah. I mean, definitely EVs are increasing in sales. I guess this is not, I mean, 100% I agree. Quarter three isn't like the signifier. So we'll have to wait until all the data is compiled for the end of the year. But still, nevertheless, some of these cars are very interesting. So we see growth rate. Now, a few brands we see actually declines like Audi, BMW. I mean, these aren't huge players anyways, so I don't want to call them irrelevant, but they're not as relevant as maybe a GM or a Cadillac or something, just because their cars are, or sorry, GM in general, not really specifically Cadillac, but just GM in general because they have so much more volume. But even if we look at some brands like Tesla still grew in market share, which is great, or sorry, grew in overall sales, which is insane because there's so many more competitors out on the road now. And like Cadillac Lyric, which is very prevalent, Chevy Blazer EV, Equinox EV, all these competitors to Tesla's vehicles. And yet Tesla still increased sales in this quarter compared to last year's, which I think is pretty interesting. Nevertheless, looking at the EV sales data, so I think an interesting thing to look at here is maybe year to date, just to give us more of an idea of where the market stands. But like we look at Tesla right now, Tesla's down 4.5%, which is a little bit marginal. But the thing that we have to consider is there's so many new competitors on the market right now, and Tesla didn't slip that much, which is really interesting. So there's so many new vehicles out on the market now. Chevy Equinox EV, Blazer EV, Honda Prologue. That's another anomaly that we can go into later. But there's a lot of new EVs out on the road, and Tesla has still maintained a pretty steady market share of around 50-ish%. That's super interesting. Now,
I mean, there's a lot of honorable mentions here, and I think like to the whole like Tesla fell a little bit, but I mean like 5%, okay. You could almost say that's a blip. To me, it's relatively even, but everyone else is picking up the slack. I think a great honorable mention here is GM.
Yes,
I have to say,
100%
I was
GM.
extremely surprised because in my mind, GM had a lot of blunders after the whole Blazer infotainment disaster
Mm-hmm.
during their rollout. But even still, yeah, you look at Cadillac,
And we have to
Chevrolet.
factor in, we have to lump in Honda to GM because Honda's EV is made by GM too. So just considering that, which is, yeah, I mean, GM's EV game is on point, really.
I pleasantly surprised. So kudos to you, GM.
Yeah,
Hopefully you're listening.
that was definitely good. Now, some were interesting, and we can look into the models later, but Hyundai seemed to, at least quarter three, slip a little bit, year over year increase. That's interesting. But we can go into the models right now, which I think tell us a little bit more of where the industry stands. Now, first off, once again, going back to GM. So we have the Acura ZDX. We have Cadillac Lyriq, Chevy Blazer EV. The Equinox EV is actually on a similar, same platform as the Blazer. It's just shortened wheelbase, which is interesting too. But even if we just consider vehicles on the exact same platform, we have Acura ZDX, Chevy Blazer EV. We have Honda Prologue, and I feel like I'm missing one. What am I missing? Okay, never mind. But we have Lyriq.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, just looking at those cars, how we're able to get such a significant amount of vehicles produced just based on one platform. It's literally the same car underneath is pretty insane. What do you have to think about that?
I think again, like it really says something in terms of GM's capability.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be interested to understand what the future strategy is as they say that they're moving away from the platform,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you invest so much in a platform and it pays off in terms of production numbers, and you're seeing it here now. I wonder what's going to happen now as they start to think about an updated strategy, you know. But I mean, I have to say, I maybe it falls short from their greater. I mean, they do a lot more other vehicles. Hold on. Sorry, I lost my audio there for a second. They do a lot more other vehicles, right? And so maybe just in terms of overall sales, you know, it's fallen short of expectations. But in comparison to the rest of the industry, I think they're doing pretty solid. I don't know. What do you think, Andrew? I mean,
Yeah,
I think this is
definitely.
a pretty solid start. Yeah.
I mean, there's some really interesting things that I see because, like, I mean, the platform that I can't think of the code off the top of my head, but the platform that the Blazer and Prologue are on, I mean, it's a good platform. It's not groundbreaking or anything. It's still 400 volts, 280-ish miles of range, 0 to 60 in 6 seconds. Like, it's nothing groundbreaking. But what's really interesting is that the Honda Prologue was actually able to outsell the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Kia EV6, not combined, but both individually. And I
No,
think that's pretty crazy.
individually. I agree because the Ionic 5 has been a solid staple, I think, of the Hyundai EV fleet. And I think, to your point, the fact that it outsold the Hyundai Ionic 5 in Q3 is a clear indicator. I think Honda's got a solid product.
Yes. And I mean, I would argue the Ioniq 5 is an objectively better car than the Prologue because way faster charging, all these other attributes. But I think the thing the Honda has is it's a Honda, and I mean, it's Honda's first electric SUV that's available. But I mean, it just kind of shows that brand recognition that people really, I guess, relate to. Just seeing, oh, it's a Honda, it's probably going to be good. And even though it's like a pretty okay EV, people are still buying it in droves. And I guess that shows branding is a very important aspect of getting your cars out on the road.
Agreed, and that they're starting on pretty solid brands, right?
Hmm.
100% agree. That right there is an indicator. Yeah, and Nissan's still pulling pretty solid. I think overall Hyundai, Kia, right? They're showing the power of their fleet and that they've got a solid offering across the board, right?
Yes.
Like you mentioned, Ionic 5 is the standout, but they really, if you want to go EV for many of your use cases or many of where you are in your life, there
Hmm.
is probably going to be an EV out there for you, which is
Yes.
fantastic. Like
100%.
before, I heard a lot of people saying, oh, really, there's the cars are too small. I've got a big family. We can't really do that. But now, you've got the EV9 right there, and it's killing it compared to the EV6.
Yeah, I would argue the
And
EV9 is
yeah,
one of the probably best third row SUVs period on the market. It's truly an incredible product. Now, I will say, because we're talking about Hyundai and Kia, we also got to talk about Genesis. And their sales have been kind of disappointing. And we're seeing, well, yes, there is an increase in the GV70, which I think is a pretty cool car. But the GV60, which is basically just a glorified Ionic, and kind of overpriced in my opinion, we're seeing that year to date, sales are down. And the Genesis G80 electrified is down 75% year over year. They have only sold 295 this year, which is super, super low.
I mean,
Um,
I think it shows you the ceiling of the Genesis brand,
mhm,
right? EVs already are a little bit expensive, right? And I have to say, I mean, I've been overall impressed with the Hyundais and the Kias.
100,
The
yeah,
EVs that they're putting out don't feel like a standard gas Hyundai or Kia. It does seem a little bit more premium, but there is a ceiling. Clearly, when you look at the numbers, there's no way they're competing with Mercedes. And I think the way that they're priced almost like they're competing with an EQB, EQE, EQS, right?
yeah. And I think the
And
G80
let's
just
be
being
honest,
80,000 is not a solid hit. But I mean, obviously, it's not a huge luxury sedan, anyways. But that car, it has been trounced by basically every other luxury EV. Now, one thing I will say in terms of luxury, because you mentioned the EQE and EQS, um, these two vehicles actually include both the sedan and SUV. So, like the EQE, there's the SUV and the sedan version. So that kind of sucks on this information because we actually can't differentiate which. Because it would be really interesting to see the differences between SUVs and sedan sales. So I will note that on the
that's
data.
fair. That's fair. That's
Now,
fair.
similar note on sedan versus SUV, we can really see this divide with the Ionic 5 and Ionic 6. So exact same car underneath, EGMP platform. Ionic 6 gets more range because it's more aerodynamic and a little bit lighter weight. I mean, look at these sales numbers. Ionic 5, 11,500 or 590 this quarter. In Ionic 6, just 2,200. So massive, massive disparity there in terms of sedan and SUV interest.
Yeah, I mean, Americans are just SUV folks, right?
Hmm.
I mean, the running joke, I think I've been a big hatchback person, right? And you would never see hatchbacks come over from Europe. What they would do is Mercedes did this, right? They would just lift up their hatchback and call it an SUV.
Yeah, with
And
the E
so
class.
exactly, and so this just goes again when you look at the numbers. I mean, look at the Mach E there, 13,000, right?
Hmm.
I think the market and the OEMs are finding that the right vehicle right now to enter in with EVs is sort of like the small crossover SUV, that Mach-E Ioniq 5 size.
Hmm.
It's kind of like just like the perfect Goldilocks fit, I think, for most people who are looking to get into EVs.
Definitely. Now, another anomaly too, at least in terms of sedans, is like the BMW i4 actually outsold the iX. Now, granted, i4 is a lot cheaper. iX is around 90,000. i4 is in the mid 50s. So that's interesting. But if we want to actually go back to sedans versus SUVs, we can actually look at the Model 3 and Model Y. So Model Y sold almost 87,000 vehicles in quarter three, whereas the Model 3 was about 58,000. Now, that disparity between the Model 3 being a sedan and the Model Y being a crossover with Tesla is far more marginal than that of Hyundai, which is really interesting too. So it seems like with Tesla, there's a much bigger spread between buyers who buy the sedan and the crossover versus Hyundai, where it looks like the majority of buyers will gravitate to the Ioniq 5.
Fair, fair. And when you look at those Tesla numbers, look at that Cybertruck, man.
Yes,
Man,
which is
it's more
crazy.
than all of Rivian combined, right?
Yes.
They launched newer vehicles. It's amazing how fast they ramped up production on them, and it's a completely new manufacturing process, right? I mean,
Yes.
stainless steel must be really hard to sort of form into place. They've got
100%.
to use. I think I've heard something like they've got these crazy new presses just to get them even in that boxy shape.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, it's really interesting that the Tesla Cybertruck outsold both the Rivian R1S and R1T combined. Very interesting for sure. But yeah, I mean, when you just compare the Cybertruck against other electric pickups on the market, Cybertruck, for everyone, it's the third best-selling EV this entire quarter, which is big news, especially for a vehicle that is very controversial and 100 grand. So most of these buyers were buying these for 100 to 120, depending on what trim you got. Um, and meanwhile, like the Ford F-150 Lightning here sold 7,000 cars, so less than half of the Cybertruck. But the Lightning you can get for around 50, 60 with incentives and such. So very interesting that such a more expensive pickup truck that is very controversial has really trounced many other established EV pickups on the market.
Yeah, no, it's super fascinating to see it succeed right off the bat, being such a very standout looking car and very
Mm-hmm.
controversial designs. But I would suspect though that for a lot of the Cybertruck owners, this is I mean it's probably not all of them, but it's probably one of their first trucks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think they fall into that stereotypical truck owner. I'd be very curious. I mean, it's the same with a lot of the Rivian R1T owners. How many of them actually use it as a truck? I'll admit, I've only used it for truck things a handful of times.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, sometimes it's just nice to have a truck.
But yeah,
The
that's the
option.
thing. Because when you think about the target audience, it's like if you go up to like any pickup truck driver, especially like here in the South, and you're like, "Do you want an EV?" They're gonna be like, "No, like I need 600 miles of range. I need to charge in 5 minutes." And it's like all this stuff. Obviously, I'm generalizing people, so I assume people who don't think like that. But I would like to bet that a lot of them would around here, just based on people I've talked to, even some of my friends, um, who think EVs are the worst thing in the entire world. The thing is, you're not going to win over those customers by making a product that's directly attracting those people. Because frankly, that's just going to be a waste of time trying to get those people over. Make something different, cool, And I think Tesla did that really well with the Cybertruck, because that's the thing with cars, like especially electric cars, is you got to know if there isn't really an audience already made for that vehicle, make an audience for it. So Cybertruck has stainless steel body, which is really cool. So it's super durable and all this stuff. It's a cool truck. Meanwhile, if Tesla made this look exactly like a Toyota Tundra, Ford F-150 or something, and just kind of made it more normal, tried to like make it a vehicle, just try to make it not so controversial, I don't think it would do as well. And you kind of see that with the Ford F-150 Lightning a little bit. But I think the Rivian strikes a really good balance between interesting, cool features, tech, and also kind of that more mainstream truck feel. But then again, I don't know. I like the different approaches for sure.
Yeah, it's standalone. I think it's going after that sort of Jeep vibe. Like,
Mm-hmm.
people who own a Jeep Gladiator truck, right? They're not really like work truck people. They're more like adventure truck folks. And then actually, I know you didn't necessarily have this on your agenda, but the Scout release was
Yes,
yesterday.
that was huge. And I put down a deposit on one of those in the hopes
You
that
did.
when it comes out, I can afford one.
It will take some time, and I'll say I've been burned by the deadlines before. With Rivian, I was supposed to get it in 2020. I didn't get it until 2022, but totally worth it. I'd just be curious along those lines in terms of like trucks that stand out that are associated with like a slightly different brand. What did you think about the Scout truck and what they're trying to offer?
So right when I saw it,
Yeah,
I think it looks awesome. It is huge. That's the thing, because the pickup truck's around 230 inches, so it's like the size of a full size pickup. SUV is 210 inches, so it's actually bigger than Kia EV9. It's about a foot longer than a Kia EV9, and I'm not sure if that's including the rear tire on the back, but that's a side note. But it's bigger than a Kia EV9, Rivian R1S, so it's a very large vehicle. Now, I guess if we look at it, just on the website, and I will say this is probably one of the nicest made automotive websites I've ever been to. It's just a very smooth, cool looking website. Yeah, if we just go down to just kind of looking at the specs of this vehicle, here we go. Yeah, I think this design is pretty incredible. I definitely get Ford Bronco vibes from it. I get slight Rivian vibes. What about you?
no, that's exactly. I have to admit, I've always enjoyed the look of the new redesigned Ford Broncos, not the sport ones, the full
Yeah, the Ford Bronco
Broncos,
Sport. I don't like that.
and yeah, that forget about that for a second. But like I saw Ford Bronco Raptor on the road, and I just thought it was like the coolest looking thing. And I think this gives off that exact kind of vibe, like you're talking about. And I have to say, I'm going to be on the lookout and might end up with one sometime in the future because it is a really really interesting car. I will say though, I mean this is a pre-production release, so we'll see how much actually carries over into production.
Yes.
But so far, I'm liking it. I'm curious to know what the reservation numbers are because I think that's a good indicator of how much of it's going to carry over and how fast they're going to end up producing these things.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, because I will say, like, a lot of this does look production ready, because side view mirrors, everything like that. Um, so yeah, I would assume definitely there'll be some changes. Uh, but yeah, I think the SUV looks crazy too. In 12.1 inches of ground clearance, that's really good. It just seems like a really fun, adventurous vehicle. Now, interesting thing with this comes as standard, fully electric, around 350 miles of range, but they will have a range extender option for these vehicles, which is going to be a very interesting move. So it's going to be a gasoline range extender, and then total range that will add on about 150 miles of range. So total range would be about 500 in the range extender models.
And I think the only time that you're really going to need that is if you're towing something,
Yes.
realistically.
And that's what I think's cool about it. So this could be a vehicle that you could more easily tow with. Me personally, I probably wouldn't tow that much, so I would just get the BEV version. But
Yeah.
I think there is a place for range extended pickup trucks just for towing. But then again, it's like, I mean, right now with where the EV pickup truck market is, it's like, because to really get the most use out of this, you're going to have to be towing really long distances. And it would be interesting to see the numbers on people with Lightnings, Rivians, Cybertrucks, how much they actually tow like cross country or whatever.
Yeah. And by then, right, the towing infrastructure may be good enough where it's not as big of a deal.
Hmm.
I know that's a big thing of Rivian's network rollout, of them designing the layouts to allow for pull throughs if you're towing something, and B, for them being strategically placed either in national parks or in very common routes to national parks, which
Yes.
is fantastic.
Yeah, I remember when I was doing some road trips this summer around Southern California, I was like, oh, cool, there's a charger here. I saw on PlugShare, and then you click on it, and it's Rivian only. I'm like, dang it. But it's in such a good location.
But they're going to open it up soon, hopefully,
Okay,
right? And it's going to be like a very similar situation to the supercharger, but sort of like further out. So so yeah, no, it's I think there's a lot of good signs that the charging is getting better,
mhm.
right? And it's happening faster than I think people realize. I know a lot of the DC fast chargers in the Nevi sites have been rolling out a bit slow, but everything that has to do with the government ends up being a lot slower. But in the meantime, I think what we're going to see, especially if people continue to buy EVs at the rate that we're seeing, right, from that report, there will be private investment into infrastructure,
Mhm.
right? And I think, like we talked on a previous episode, if you get that model right, like Rove, I think is attempting to, or that Rivian site in Yosemite, if you put some more of those and you find other ways to monetize, I think it shouldn't be an issue for a private investor to invest in the right infrastructure and to capitalize on this huge transition.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, just to change the whole reframing of it from just being a Walmart parking lot you go and do a charge to kind of a little area where there's restaurants or stuff like that, especially like shopping malls, because I know like Mercedes is working with Simon Malls for their charging network, and just a way to generate some more revenue to the local community is pretty cool. And I think charging networks or charging stations are a great way to do that.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a way to sort of make them like the new rest stops, right?
Hmm.
Right now, a lot of the rest stops are super fast. Like, the service plazas, you're only there for 30 minutes. But if you put some charging stations there and a couple of additional amenities, I think you can really make the experience a lot better for a lot of people. Give them a chance to, like for instance, for me, I didn't realize that Ohio had a wine valley until I stopped to charge
Really,
in the middle of Ohio, and I was like, "There's a ton of wineries around here," and comes to find out that there's a certain area of Ohio that's known for making wine.
that's pretty
I mean, it's
cool.
not Napa Valley, but it's it's still something.
Definitely.
It's a nice experience to go. Not that I'm advocating for drinking and driving, but it is nice in the summertime to be sipping on a little bit of wine while you're waiting for a charge.
I
Yeah.
bet. But yeah, no, because that's the thing. It's like everyone going on road trips, and this is like my big thing that I always say, and I probably mentioned this on the previous episode. It's just when you're going on a road trip, even when you go in a gas car, you will be stopping. Don't worry, because everyone's like, well, I don't stop. I drive 700 miles without stopping or doing anything. And it's like, that doesn't actually happen. It's like, you're going to drive about 200 miles. And by that point, you want to stretch, you want to get some food. And guess what? That stretch break, that food break, it's going to be about 15 to 20 minutes. And guess what? If you're in a Kia EV6, in that 15 to 20 minutes, your car can go from 10 to 80%. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's my
It's
take.
it's really it's really not. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how things play out with Iona as like a new player coming in. And I think they've got the benefit of learning from what works and what doesn't work from some of the players. EVgo, I think they led the way so many years ago, but there's so many terrible EVgo sites and so many like poor locations where it's like really, really hard to find. EVgo in Nashville, at a beautiful mall, but it's like in the darkest, dankest corner of the mall, and it's not even easy to go from this charging station into the mall. Like if you're expecting people to go in there to go spend money, make it a little bit easier to get to instead of having to walk like some crazy different way. Electrify Americas too. I think they did great in terms of partnering up with a great partner like Walmart, right? I mean,
Hmm.
Walmart I loves to sort of pass around the statistic that they're within 50 miles of like 80% of America or something like that, right? So you partner up with them and you're going to be decently close to most people. But if you're on a road trip, man, the last thing you want to do is stop at like the 20th Walmart parking lot in the middle of nowhere. And their reliability is just god awful. I mean, Electrify America, please pick it up. They're in so many great spots. Like they are for if they have been the best non-Tesla option if you're going long distance. But you hit one bad station and it can really really screw up your day. And I think if you drive in the Tesla network, that just doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
Tesla network is so good, so seamless. Plug in, start charging. Even though Teslas aren't the fastest charging EVs on the road, it just works super well. That said, I will say the new Model 3 rear-wheel drive charges really quickly. I didn't see the exact numbers on it, but Out of Spec does their 10% challenge and basically charge at 10% for 15 minutes and then see how far the car goes. And the Model 3, I think, was in the top 5. Obviously, a lot far behind like the Porsche Taycan and stuff like that. But that new Model 3 is pretty cool. But I think that does
yeah,
say a lot that even with like Tesla, for instance, it's like you can have a car that charges slower, but still the user experience is going to be so much better just because the stations work. And yeah.
yeah. I mean, so I was at a V4 earlier today, actually, a new V4 station, and they had signs for people who didn't have a Tesla on how to unlock it, and it was just so straightforward. Like, there's a sign, all you got to do is plug in, and there's a QR code if you need the app to go and set up your account to pay, and it was literally just like unclick, click. The only thing is, though, I'll say that V4 site was at like a Comfort Inn or something, and you had to literally cross like this busy road to try to get to a gas station across the way to go use the restroom or anything. So maybe not the greatest site selection, but I mean the hardware itself is just it's unmatched, and that's where I think there's opportunities for someone else to figure this out and just kill it. It's out there for the taking, folks.
Yep, definitely. Well, yeah, because I've been to some superchargers before at like hotels, and those are always a little odd because it's like, A, if you're staying at a hotel, you probably just level 2 charge. There's no need to supercharge, but they're decent to have there nonetheless. But well, I guess A, if you're staying at the hotel, you could probably charge off peak. You could like look at the time, and you're like, okay, we'll start charging at like 11:30 or something. But yeah, the hotels are always interesting because like sometimes I just go into the lobby with like my backpack. Maybe I'll bring my suitcase in so I look like I belong there, and then I'll just get some work done for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting. Again, though, right? Like if you set up like a lounge like Rove or the flagship Harrison in San Francisco Bay, that place is nice. If they start thinking about it differently in those terms, I think you can do really really well and stand out for this new wave of EV driver. So yeah.
I agree.
Anyways, do you want to go on to your EV deal?
Sure. Yep. So the EV deal this week, we're going to share my screen again. This one is the Porsche Taycan. So this is not a bargain per se. It's not like something you can get for 20,000, but I think it's really interesting how much Taycans have come down in value recently. And I think specifically the certified pre-owned ones, and I mentioned the CPO ones because you will get 2 years of a limited mileage bumper to bumper warranty once the basic expires. So if we look at this Porsche Taycan, 2021 right here, looks pretty nice. You got the nice, I forgot what color the interior is called. Ventilated seats, nonetheless, nice interior. I think it's a chalk interior. And if we go to its Carfax, wherever it is, here we go. We see that's approved, certified, pre-owned. So this car will have 8 months left on the bumper-to-bumper warranty, and then followed by another 2 years of unlimited mileage warranty. So I was thinking, I was like, this could be the excellent car for Turo if you wanted to have one on the website, because you could be fine with drivers putting a ton of miles on it because it'll be all under the basic warranty. Nevertheless, interesting thing about this car is it had an MSRP of $107,000, and now you can buy it for 55. So
That's a great deal.
that's a lot of
Yeah.
depreciation. Now, granted, it's been on the road for 3 years, 38,000 miles, but if you want to save your money, you probably shouldn't buy a brand new Porsche Taycan.
Agreed. Agreed. It's one of those, like we had talked about last time, it's a double-edged sword, right?
Mhm.
Not great for the original owner, but great for you if you're buying it used. And Porsche put in a lot of effort into the driving dynamics of this vehicle, right? And so it drives like a Porsche, right? It's one of those things where there's not too many Porsches out there that you can get for $50,000
Mhm.
that are this new, right? 2 to 3
Or
years
cool.
old.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I think you're right. I mean, it's great, and it comes with the warranty. It's an interesting thought on the Turo. Actually, that's the last time when I did get a chance to drive one is we Turo to take on, just because we were like, we got to check it out. Let's check on Turo, so you're right. That's a great way to sort of try to squeeze some benefit out of the last couple of years.
definitely. Because I think even if we look at this one, well, I guess it's mostly sold or something, but I mean, this was a 4S, so this was probably with options, probably 120 to 130 brand new. Now it is 2020, so it is an older one, but CPO, so you got 2 years bumper to bumper, which I think I would do in a Porsche Taycan, just because there's not a ton of data points to get off reliability on them, just because it is a low volume car. I've tried to get some information about reliability on them, but you just can't really get much. And then plus, if you read forums, these are already Porsche drivers, so they're used to probably paying some maintenance. So if they get by without having to do all the regular internal combustion engine stuff, they're probably gonna be pretty happy. So don't know about the reliability that much on them, but haven't heard anything too bad.
But it's Porsche, right? So even if something does go wrong, they're going to treat you well and make sure that you're all right. Their service is well known for taking care of their customers, so I don't think you'd have to worry too much.
Yeah, until that
So
warranty's out, then
then yeah, then you might be on your own. But again, though, how much is there to break in an EV, really? Um,
well, so we say that, but then there's some EVs that we look at. Audi e-tron, big example. That one, the front motors sometimes lose coolant, and then the whole motor, the car will just stall on the side of the road, and then Audi will ask nicely, well, not nicely, they will demand $11,000 for a new front motor. Like, you read the forums, there's so many people who had this issue. Like, one, I think the craziest one I read, some guy had 50,200 miles. So right out of the basic warranty
yeah,
at 50,000 miles, $11,000 repair. And then he negotiated the dealer down to $9,000 for a known issue that just happens to happen on a lot of Audi e-trons.
yeah.
So,
That's kind of like a total. That sucks because you put in so much money in such a nice car, and you expect Audi as a brand. Who makes their motors? Is it Bosch?
I'm not too sure off the top of my head. I could probably look that up.
Because there's a lot of interesting. Like I've heard Rivian and Bosch have a bit of a lawsuit. I think now going back and forth, and I think to be honest, it was smart of Rivian to start to take the engine in house, probably
Mhm.
because of these types of issues. I would suspect, and having control over this stuff, you know. But
Yeah.
but yeah, and no, but it's all still early, right?
Mhm.
It's all still early to see how it's all going to play out. I will say, if you guys haven't seen Sandy Munro's videos and breakdowns, they're really, really good. If you really, really want to get into like the engineering and the technical stuff, he goes into like all the pros and cons of every design choice, which is you could just really nerd out. But anyways, awesome. Yeah, so I think is that it for this
Yep.
this week?
That should be it for this
All right.
episode. Thank you
All
for
right.
watching, everyone.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you next time. All right. Bye.